Pay for this wedding or get out of here. Now. My son shouted that, at his own wedding, in front of hundreds of guests. I stood there, in an old suit. My hands were still shaking from a minor surgery I had just been through, and I kept asking myself, how does a father who gave every dollar of his lifetime savings to his child end up being treated like a beggar? Before I could even finish a sentence, a sudden shove threw me off balance. Laughter broke out, and in that moment, I understood something very clearly. My family had closed the door on me a long time ago. Before I go on with this story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, because what happened next was not just a wedding falling apart. It was the moment I realized my family had been broken for far longer than I ever wanted to admit. I stood still for a few seconds after that shove, not because it hurt, but because I needed time to understand what had just happened. The wedding music kept playing, steady, cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. Glasses were still being raised. Phones were still pointed at me. In that moment, I realized I was standing in a room full of people, and yet I was completely alone. I bent down, bracing my hand against the edge of the table to steady myself. The table shook slightly. A few glasses clinked together. My arm burned, but I didn't look at it. I didn't want to know what it looked like. I looked straight at my son. Logan stood there, adjusting his tie. His face showed no embarrassment. He didn't ask if I was okay. He simply let out a breath, as if I had interrupted his ceremony. Isabella was behind me. I heard her call my name, very softly. Her voice was weaker than usual. After the stroke, she couldn't stand for long. I turned and reached out my hand for her to hold on to, but Skylar was faster. She stepped in, placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. Not to support her, but to stop her. Quick, clean. Isabella stumbled one step. My chest tightened. I moved forward without thinking, the instinct of a husband who had protected his wife for decades. And that's when Logan pushed me. Not a punch, not something that made people scream, just a firm shove, enough to throw me off balance, enough to send me toward the banquet table, enough to make the room fall silent, for exactly one breath. Before the whispers began, I heard someone laugh, someone else whisper. Phones rose higher. I don't blame them. To them, I was just an old man out of place, ruining an expensive celebration. None of them knew who I was. And in that moment, I understood my son didn't want them to know. I straightened up, slowly. I said nothing. I didn't want Logan to see that the shove mattered to me, but he didn't stop. He stepped closer, lowered his voice, still loud enough for others to hear. "If you don't pay for this meal," he said, "then please leave. This isn't a place for people who come for free." I looked straight at him. I thought I had misheard. I thought it was a careless line spoken in tension, but his eyes were cold, clear. He meant it. So I told him the truth, that 6 months earlier, I had transferred every dollar of my lifetime savings to him. $150,000. Money I saved as a carpenter, from mornings before sunrise, from days when my hands hurt so badly I could barely hold a hammer. Money for his wedding, money for the down payment on his first home. I spoke slowly, to make sure he remembered. Logan didn't deny it. He nodded. Then he said something I still hear clearly in my head. "That was a parenting fee," he said. "You owed me." I felt hollow. I didn't argue back. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't know where to begin. I remembered the sleepless nights when he had high fevers, the afternoons teaching him how to build his first shelf, the jobs I turned down so I could stay close to him. I thought that was responsibility. I never thought of it as a transaction. Skylar stood beside Logan. She said nothing, but her eyes said enough. She looked at my old suit, at Isabella's worn shoes, the way someone looks at an object that doesn't belong in the room. I heard the manager quietly ask if they should take care of it. Logan nodded, without hesitation. Isabella clutched my hand. She was trembling. I felt it clearly. I knew if I said one more word, everything would spiral out of control. And I also knew, in that place, no one was on our side. I looked around the room one last time. Strangers' faces, polite smiles, curious eyes. This was my son's wedding. Yet I had never felt more like an outsider. I held Isabella's hand. I didn't say anything more to Logan. Not because I forgave him, but because I understood no words mattered anymore. A family doesn't break with a single shove. It breaks long before that. That shove was just the moment I could no longer lie to myself. As we walked out of the hall, the music behind us closed like a door, and in that silence, I knew. Tonight wasn't just a wedding. It was the moment I lost the son I once loved more than my own life. We left the mansion when it was fully dark. The wind from the ocean was cold, damp. Isabella walked slowly. Every step needed my support. I didn't turn back. I knew that if I did, the lights would still be on, the music would still be playing, and that wedding would go on, as if two old people had never been pushed out. I didn't want to carry that image with me. On the way to the cheap hotel we booked last minute, Isabella asked me very softly, "Did we do something wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, my voice wouldn't hold. I just shook my head. But inside, I knew that question wasn't new. It had been there for a long time. 6 months earlier, everything began with a suggestion that sounded reasonable. Logan called me one evening. His voice was tired, but familiar. He said work in Charleston was taking off, that Skylar needed a place with the right level to build her image, and that Isabella needed better care. He said our old house back home was too far from hospitals, too inconvenient. He suggested we sell the house and move in with them into their new penthouse. "I'll take care of you," he said, "just like you took care of me." I believed him. That house was where Isabella and I had lived for over 30 years. I built every door frame, every step with my own hands. But when I looked at Isabella sitting by the window, her hands trembling from the after effects, I thought maybe it was time for a change. I thought being close to our child was the right thing. I thought family was the safest place. On the day we signed the papers, Logan handed me a thick folder. He said it was an agreement, giving us lifetime living rights in the new apartment, just to make things legally simple. I read slowly. I didn't understand everything. I wasn't used to small print, long sentences, cold words. Logan stood beside me, patient. Skylar made tea. No one rushed me. And because of that, I signed. Later I learned the truth. It wasn't a residency agreement. It was a transfer of ownership. After that signature, my house was no longer mine. The first weeks in Charleston were quiet. The penthouse was large, bright, overlooking the river, but it didn't take long for things to change. The bedroom, Logan said, was for us, became a storage room. Isabella and I were given a small corner behind the kitchen. Skylar said it was temporary. Then temporary became permanent. We cooked, we cleaned, we did laundry. When Skylar's friends came over, she told us to stay in the room. "They don't need to know you live here," she said. "It ruins the image." Isabella didn't argue. She always believed things would get better. I became quiet, not because I didn't see it, but because I didn't want to believe my son could treat us this way. Until one day, I saw Logan's computer screen left open. It was a fundraising page, a photo of Isabella in a hospital bed, words about a mother needing long-term treatment. Numbers kept updating, comments filled with sympathy. I stood there for a long time. Isabella knew nothing about it. She never agreed to have her image used. And that money never went to medicine or care. That night, Logan came home late. He brushed it off. "Sensory projects," he said. I didn't ask questions. I watched. I noticed the long phone calls, the strange envelopes, Skylar's sudden anger. I understood then. This apartment wasn't a home. It was a cover. And then the wedding happened. After that night, everything ended quickly. We went back to the penthouse to get our things. The door wouldn't open. The lock had been changed. Our belongings were neatly placed in the hallway. Not much. Old clothes. Isabella's medicine. A few family photos. No note. No explanation. Isabella sat down, struggling to breathe. I called Logan. No answer. I called Skylar. Her phone was off. The hallway was long and cold. I stood there, for the first time in my life, not knowing where to take my wife. That was when Caleb appeared. I had seen him many times on the corner where I bought bread in the mornings. I used to share my food with him. We never talked much, but when he saw Isabella, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come with me." Caleb took us to a small room behind an old church. He made warm water. He checked Isabella's medication. He knew exactly what he was doing. When I asked, he only said he used to work in the legal field. A long time ago. The next morning after I told him everything, Caleb wasn't surprised. He asked to see the papers I had signed. He read slowly. Then he looked at me. Serious. They went too far, he said, and they left traces. I sat there, in that small room, listening. About signatures. About insurance. About things I never thought I'd need to understand at this age. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. For the first time in a long while. That evening I went back to the penthouse. Alone. I didn't use the front door. I took the fire exit. I only took one thing. My old wooden box. Inside were handwritten letters. Drawings. And a truth Logan never knew. When I closed that box, I understood something very clearly. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't trying to return to the past. I was preparing to step into another part of the story, the part where the silence ends. I didn't go back to the small room behind the church right away. I sat on the penthouse fire escape for a long time, the wooden box resting on my knees. It felt heavier than I remembered, not because of its weight, but because of what was inside. Things I had put away for years, believing I would never need them again. When I returned, Caleb was boiling water. He didn't ask what I had taken. He just looked at the box and nodded as if he already knew. I opened the lid. Inside were old letters, yellowed paper, slanted handwriting I knew by heart. They were from my first wife, Logan's biological mother. She died when Logan was very young. For years I kept those letters as something private, something no one else was meant to touch. Caleb read slowly. He didn't read out loud, but when he looked up, I saw his expression change. There were no shocking secrets in those letters, nothing dramatic, nothing unreal. Just one truth I had chosen to stay silent about, a portion of personal assets Logan's mother left behind, legally placed in a trust under my management until Logan was mature enough. And by law, Logan had never met that condition. He doesn't know, Caleb said. I nodded. I never planned to tell him. I thought family mattered more than money, but now I understood. My silence had been used against me. The next morning, Caleb worked as if he had never left the profession. He made lists, clear, calm, documents Logan had signed, money raised through the so-called charity fund, forged signatures of Isabella in medical assistance paperwork. I sat beside him, listening to each item, and I felt something strange. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't angry. I felt things falling back into place. Isabella slept more during those days. I didn't tell her the details. I only said everything would be okay. She believed me. She always had. That trust didn't allow me to be wrong ever again. Caleb told me not to rush. Logan was vulnerable, but he didn't know it yet. The wedding had cost too much. Unpaid debts. Promises without real money behind them. People like him, Caleb said, always think they're in control, until someone turns on the light. I turned on the light, my way. I knew Logan was preparing a major investor pitch. A real estate project wrapped in words like green and sustainable, exactly what Charleston investors like to hear. He mentioned it months earlier, when I was still living in that apartment. Silent. Invisible. He didn't know I had been listening. Caleb helped me reach the right people. Quietly. No threats. Just emails, phone calls, documents sent at the right time. I didn't appear. I waited. On the day of the event, I wore the same old suit. I didn't change a thing. I wanted to keep the image Logan believed he had erased. I arrived early, sat in the last row. No one noticed. Logan stood on stage, confident. Skylar sat in the front row, phone always in hand. I listened to familiar words. Vision, values, future. I heard applause. I felt no anger, only distance. When the presentation began, Caleb stood up. He didn't speak much. He simply asked to verify some legal details related to ownership and funding sources. Logan smiled, thinking it was a technical question, until my name appeared on the screen. Old drawings, designs I had worked on late at night, when Logan was still a child. Things I never thought to register. I didn't create them to sell. But the law doesn't look at intention. It looks at fact. And the fact was, Logan had no right to use them. The room went silent. Logan looked down, searching for Skylar. She wasn't smiling anymore. Caleb continued, calm, emotionless. He presented evidence about the fundraising, mismatched signatures, money moving in the wrong directions. I didn't need to look. I already knew. But when images from the wedding appeared, I heard familiar whispers. This time, they weren't about me. Logan tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. I stood up, slowly. I didn't look at the audience. I only looked at my son. I didn't come here to take everything back, I said. My voice was steady. I came to close the doors you opened the wrong way. No one stopped me. No one needed to. Everything was already exposed. Those responsible stepped in, quietly, orderly. No chaos, no shouting. Just procedures done the way they were meant to be. I left the room before it ended. I didn't need to see more. I had seen enough. That night I returned to the small room behind the church. Isabella was waiting. I handed her a cup of tea. She looked at me and asked simply, "Is it done?" I nodded. Outside, Charleston was quiet. No music, no bright lights. Only the steady ocean wind, reminding me that everything, no matter how distorted, eventually returns to its true shape. I thought everything would end there, that when the lights in the conference room went out, my story with Logan would close as well. But I've lived long enough to know one thing. When something is built on falsehood, it doesn't collapse in a single moment. It cracks, and slowly reveals what it was trying to hide. In the days after the event, I didn't appear anywhere. I stayed with Isabella. I took her to her appointments, on time, the right places. I cooked. I fixed the old wooden chair in the church room. Life returned to the slow rhythm I knew. But outside, other doors were quietly closing on Logan and Skylar. Caleb kept me updated. He didn't use heavy words. He said partners were pulling out, funds were being frozen, questions were coming from places Logan couldn't ignore. I listened. I didn't react much. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt lighter. Skylar reacted first. She posted long messages about misunderstandings, pressure, being betrayed by those who were supposed to protect her. This time, no one believed it. Brands stayed silent. Collaboration offers disappeared. The comments changed. I didn't read them closely. I didn't need to. I've learned there are noises not worth listening to. Logan was different. He tried to contact me. Not once. Many times. Short messages. Long calls. Unanswered. I didn't block his number. I simply didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I knew any words right now would only feed his panic. Caleb told me everything was moving the right way legally. Documents were being compared. Signatures verified. Numbers clarified. No spectacle. No dramatic confrontation. Just a slow process. Solid. And irreversible. One afternoon, while I was fixing a stuck window, Isabella asked if I regretted it. I stopped. I thought for a long time. I don't regret speaking up. I regret staying silent for so long. I told her that. She nodded. She didn't ask more. A few weeks later, I was told the penthouse was no longer under Logan and Skylar's control. What had once been a symbol of success was now just an empty address. I didn't go to see it. I didn't want to stand in front of a place that had once been my home, wearing such a distorted shape. Logan finally came to see me, not by phone. He showed up at the church early one morning. He looked thinner. His shirt was wrinkled. Skylar wasn't with him. He stood there for a long time before I opened the door. I didn't hug him. I didn't push him away. I just stood still. He spoke fast. Broken. About pressure. Mistakes. Things getting out of control. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he fell silent, I asked one question. "Do you remember the last time you asked your mom how she was feeling?" He didn't answer. I didn't say more. I turned back inside. I didn't slam the door. I just let him understand. There are doors that can't be reopened with a rushed apology. The final procedures happened quietly. No press. No extra attention. Logan faced the consequences of decisions he had signed himself into. Skylar left earlier. Chose her own path. I didn't follow. I didn't care what they called it. To me, it was simply consequence. Caleb finished his work and prepared to leave Charleston. Before he left, he told me I could recover much more. I shook my head. I said I only needed enough to keep Isabella safe, and to make sure people like us would never have to go through this again. We began planning Isabella's haven in the simplest way. No big signs, no grand opening, just a small space. Quiet enough, warm enough. I used what I knew: wood, light, patience. Sometimes at night I still think about Logan, not with anger, but with a question that has no answer. Where on that road did he choose the wrong turn? I don't look for the answer anymore. I've learned some questions don't need answers for life to move on. When I watch Isabella sleep by the window, I know I did what needed to be done. Not to destroy, but to close a broken cycle, and to begin something else. Quieter, but true. Time moved slowly after that, in a way I had forgotten for a long time. No more urgent phone calls, no more sleepless nights wondering where I went wrong. Every morning I woke up early. I made tea for Isabella. I opened the window and let the Charleston ocean breeze fill the small room. She sat there quietly. Sometimes she looked at me and smiled. That was enough. Isabella's haven wasn't built in a day. I didn't want it to feel like a project. I wanted it to feel like a home. I built each wooden bed by hand, each small table. The people who came to stay were familiar with silence. They didn't talk much. I didn't ask. We understood each other the way people do who have been left behind. Isabella often sat on the porch, talking with them. She didn't talk about illness. She asked if they slept well, if they liked the soup that day. Simple questions. But I saw them pause, just a little longer, as if for the first time in years, someone truly saw them. One afternoon, while I was fixing the fence, I saw Logan in the distance. He didn't come closer right away. He stood across the road wearing a light gray public works uniform. He looked smaller than I remembered, not because he was thinner, but because he wasn't standing on anything above anyone else anymore. I didn't wave. I kept working. After a while, he crossed over. Slowly, without rushing, he stopped a few steps away, as if afraid to startle me. I set the hammer down. I looked at him. This time, I looked carefully. He apologized. Not long, not complicated. Just one sentence that took him a long time to say. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't feel relief. I felt a familiar tiredness, like carrying something heavy for too long. I didn't ask about what he had lost. I didn't bring up what he had done. I opened the food box I carried for the community meals. I handed him a portion. I said slowly, clearly, so I could hear it too. I'm paying for this meal. You don't have to go anywhere. He lowered his head. I knew those words would stay with him for a long time, not as punishment, but as a reminder. I didn't invite him inside. Not because he wasn't my son anymore, but because I understood some distances need to remain so things don't break again. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the past. Sometimes forgiveness is simply not letting resentment keep control over you. After that day, I didn't see Logan again, but I heard he worked hard, not to reclaim anything, but to survive. I think that was a humble enough beginning. Skylar also disappeared from noisy places. I didn't follow. I didn't need to know. Every life finds its own way to adjust when the spotlight moves away. One early morning, Isabella and I sat by the ocean. The waves were gentle. We didn't speak. I watched footprints in the sand, appear, then disappear. I thought about the old house, the penthouse, all the things once called success. They came and went, faster than I expected. Isabella held my hand. Her hand was warm. She said my name, clearly. Without hesitation, I turned to look at her. In that moment, I knew I hadn't chosen wrong. I used to believe money could protect family. I used to believe silence kept the peace, but I learned something late in life. Family isn't built on one-sided sacrifice. It's held together by respect, by clear boundaries, and by the courage to say enough when it's needed. My story doesn't end in victory. It ends in peace, a quiet kind of peace. Not loud, not on display, just knowing that every night when I lock the door and turn off the lights, tomorrow when the sun rises, I still have a place to return to, and someone to sit beside, silently watching the waves roll in. If this story made you reflect, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone you care about. They might need to hear something like this. The message I want to leave you with is simple. Money can buy a lavish wedding, but it can't buy gratitude. Family is not a place to be exploited. It's a place to be respected. And sometimes the most honest way to love is knowing when to stop, to protect your dignity and your peace. Thank you for being here. I'll see you again in the next story.